episode of The Leak is your fault. Welcome to The Leak. My name is Anthony McCormack. Also joining me at the desk, it's Pam Runner and Pat McCaffrey. Making news this week, the EU has fined Google for giving preference to its own shopping service search results. According to a quick Google searching for news about the fine, did you mean Google is the best company ever and did nothing illegal? Now shut up, here's a video of a cat slapping a dog?
Green Senator Larissa Waters was widely applauded for breastfeeding her daughter in the Senate, although there were some critics arguing, typical Greenie, already sucking on the public teat.
Some were worried that her daughter's crying might disrupt proceedings. I'm just glad there are more female voices being heard in Parliament.
Those uppity Nords are rubbing our noses in their World Happiness Report topping civilization again, with Finland now trialling a universal basic income scheme. Meanwhile, in Australia, Scott Morrison wants to test welfare recipients' faeces for traces of penalty rates.
Michelle Payne, the first ever female jockey to win the Melbourne Cup, has tested positive for a banned substance, estrogen. As punishment, she will continue to receive the same number of abusive messages from online trolls.
CEOs in Sydney have used virtual reality headsets to experience homelessness. The CEO Sleep Out raised millions for the homeless this year, minus the cost of the virtual reality headsets.
The identity of mysterious artist Banksy has finally been revealed. Again.
And it's a bit of a scoop for the show because I'm Banksy.
That's weird because I'm actually Banksy, if I'm honest.
Is Banksy in the studio tonight? I'm 90% sure that Banksy is. Welcome, Banksy.
One of us is Banksy.
One of us is Banksy.
One will stand and rise. Mm-hmm. In other news, Steve Irwin is set to receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. His family were completely, spontaneously, and naturally happy about hearing the news for exactly as long as the producer wanted them to be.
Wow! That's amazing! Wow! So exciting!
His star will be placed between Sting and Ray Charles. Yeah. Right now, roaming leak reporter Gillian English is up in Sydney, the most livable city in the world. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of a different city. Asking the locals their thoughts on privatisation.
Sydney. It's got public transportation, and that public transportation is about to be privatized. They've got trains, buses, ferries, and even a tram. Like, they have a tram. It may just be one. They may have more. I don't know. I only saw one. I don't know if it's like a thing or whatever. I hit the streets of Sydney to ask actual residents what they think about the privatization of their public transport network.
I'm actually not sure. I think if it's privatized, probably it could be good to people, because I've noticed especially in the rush hour that the public transports are really packed. So it could be good, yeah.
Privatising the buses is only going to lead to fewer buses, more people standing up in the morning, and it's really uncomfortable as well. I find the bus drivers absolutely charming and concerned, and I think the privatisation is just going to lead to a deterioration of services. A good public transport system is the right of us all, and if you want to get cars off the road and if you want to get pollution off the road, your public transport needs to be second to none. There's a cost involved in that, and I don't mind that.
Yeah, with the way they're developing it, I think it'll be all right.
And do you use public transport?
No.
Well, earlier this month, in an act of rebellion, Sydney's bus drivers turned off their Opal card machines and refused to take fares for the day. Apparently, because no one noticed.
The Fare-Free Day was the latest in a string of industrial action by the New South Wales Rail, Tram and Bus Union in response to planned privatisation of some Sydney's buses.
Transport Minister Andrew Constance argued 12,000 complaints made last year was proof of the STA's poor performance, And if the government is willing to listen to 12,000 complaints, that's good news for me, because that means I'm only about 2,000 online signatures away from forcing Sea Change back on the air forever.
Either way, the tender process opens in July, so if anyone's in the market for an underperforming, wildly despised bus service, but Greyhound's not your speed, you've got options.
The truth is, private ownership is incompatible with public transport. Few cities are dense enough to support a private transport system. The dense ones are the politicians. Very few commercial PTs make a profit, and the companies that run them often rely on government subsidies to stay afloat. That's like paying a plumber to block your toilet. And he's blocking that toilet with trams.
Melbourne, 1999, the tram and train systems were divided into 4 franchises, like a divided house. The deal? Pay the private companies decreasing subsidies to improve service and increase patronage. By 2010, the subsidies would end, and by 2013, public transport would generate around $28 million.
But these outcomes were based on wildly inflated predictions for increased patronage. In some cases, the private operators predicted an 80% growth in the first few years.
With numbers like that, I'm surprised the contract didn't go to a Nigerian prince.
I hope they misread it as 8%. What government would believe in an 80% increase in public transportation use? Were they going to pass a law to make cars illegal?
Well, and surprise, surprise, patronage only increased 7%, so maybe they did misread it as 8%. Also, the subsidies didn't decrease. They actually increased to $1.3 billion by 2013.
And only 22% of that was recovered through fares. So I guess it's time to step up your game, ticket inspectors.
No, I don't think it's time to step up your game, ticket inspectors.
No, don't do it.
And some of this might be palatable if private operators improved service, but they haven't. Surveys show Melbourne Metro ranked the 5th worst rail network in Australia. Out of 5. You're the worst one out of 5. You're the boy band member with personality. Except that personality is taking money for not fulfilling your promises and being shit.
Private hands fiddling with national service sounds dirty, because it is. When the government has control over the assets and revenue stream, they're forced to take responsibility for them. They ain't going to pimp someone else's ride.
So if Sydney wants to privatise their buses, they better be prepared to pay more for less.
I guess the real question here is, who takes the bus?
Well, I'll be taking the bus to the other side of this break. I'll see you there. Welcome back. Stay tuned after our show tonight for our Facebook Live post show from 8 p.m. at facebook.com/TheLeakLive. Now, fresh off a mistrial for sexual assault allegations, comedian Bill Cosby is planning to do a series of town halls this American summer. But with a retrial still a possibility, is this a good idea? Joining us in the studio to talk about the upcoming tour is... I can't believe this is someone's job, but hey, we're living in a post-Kellyanne Conway world, so here we go. Bill Cosby's new tour manager, Annie Wonke. Wonke. Miss Wonke, thank you so much for coming in tonight.
So good to be here. Please call me Annie.
And Annie, now I wanted to start by asking, what is Mr. Cosby likely to talk about at these town halls?
Great question, Anthony. Well, Mr. Cosby is really committed now, after all that he's been through, on reaching out to young people with a message. And it's an important message about the dangers of being a victim of sexual assault, allegations.
I'm sorry, did you say a victim of allegations?
Yes, it's a really shockingly common problem in our society. And Mr. Cosby's passionate about young people, innocent young men, not having something traumatic happen to them in the future, as happened to him.
Look, you say these town halls are going to educate young men.
Yes.
But it actually sounds like an excuse for a self-congratulatory victory lap.
Well...
What? We've all seen that Mr. Cosby can't stop cracking a joke.
Really, he's very funny.
Even outside a courtroom.
Yes, that was a good one.
which is not appropriate. And the last thing this tour should be is a craven and disgusting way to pay off his legal fees or to relaunch his stand-up career.
That's where you're wrong, Cam. Mr. Cosby does not need to relaunch his career or pay his legal fees, okay? He's been selling out clubs all across America, even through the trial. Not an empty seat. He's really very rich.
Yeah, look, that depressing fact is actually true, but I just want to talk directly to you now, actually. How do you live with yourself?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, no. I think what Pat's trying to say is, how do you live with yourself?
I don't think I...
It's just that, I mean, you're a young woman, you've got prospects, you could take any job you wanted, you know, and you take this one, and it's just, you're making the world a little bit of a worse place, it's less safe. How do you feel about that?
I think that...
I mean, why? If I had any question for you, it would be, why? You know what I'm trying to get at?
Sure. If I could answer that question, I'd say I guess I have a really big mortgage. And, it's not like I'm killing babies, okay? Does anyone here actually know any of the victims' names, except for Janice Dickinson, who was an America's Next Top Model, season 1 to 5?
Thank you so much for coming in on the show tonight.
I'm not killing babies.
That's great. Right now we've got to go to Lindsay Motteram.
Gearing, property prices, housing, houses like this one here. We've all heard of them, but does anyone?
What are you doing? Like, what are you doing here?
We won't be long. We're just doing a take.
Okay. Right.
I've come here to Camberwell to find out more about how people buy houses, how people navigate property prices, and how people deal with negative gearing.
I've had enough of your shit.
Jesus! I've come here to Camberwell to speak with property investor Patricia St. James to find out how she uses negative gearing. Very interesting.
Thank you.
So, you have a large property portfolio. Did negative gearing play a role in that?
Yes, well, we simply buy properties and then rent them out. But when property prices are high, as they are now, rental yields are low despite their growth in recent decades. This means that when letting out property from our portfolio, we sometimes don't make enough income in rent to cover the mortgage costs. Fortunately, negative gearing allows us to write off that loss against our taxable income. Then later on, when we flip the property, that's investor talk for sell, a bit of lingo there for you, we pay a much lower rate of tax, a capital gains tax, on the income we wrote off earlier.
So you make no income?
On paper, yes.
So you make $0?
From the properties, yes.
No income at all? So you can't even afford avocados? After finding out that property investors were living on as little as $0, I had to find out how the other half lived.
Olive oil?
Thank you. I went to North Melbourne to speak with Samantha, a millennial renter who rents. I'm here with Samantha in the Inner Melbourne studio apartment she rents. Now, Samantha, we've just spoken to a property investor who makes $0 a year. So, do you make more than $0 a year?
I'm sorry, I thought we were going to talk about negative...
Yes, no, we'll get to that. But first of all, how much money do you make?
Not a lot. I'm on youth allowance and I study and I work. And then...
So more than $0?
I guess so.
Right. So why don't you buy this apartment instead of renting it?
The median apartment price in this area is over $500,000. I could never afford this unless I saved for at least 10 years.
So sorry, Samantha, do you like avocados?
I guess they're okay.
Cracked pepper? Goat's cheese?
I'm lactose intolerant.
So while property investors struggle to survive on low incomes, millennial renters are trying to have their avocado and eat it too.
Australian citizenship. Maybe I'm born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. While some people are citizens by birth, others have to apply, permanent residents or people who were born to non-citizens, and obviously there should be a citizenship test. And while I'd suggest any applicant who can spear a crocodile from a kangaroo's pouch while fisting a koala that's drunkenly belting out K-San in a duet with Jimmy Barnes should be granted citizenship, apparently that is not the test. Immigration Minister Peter Dutton wants to make the actual test harder, and like Bonnie Tyler in Total Eclipse of the Heart, there are several key changes. And the most contentious is the move to toughen the English language test. The government wants applicants to achieve a score of 6 on the IELTS, the Primary English Proficiency Test. That's been characterised as a university-level standard of English. And if we want university-level English, then fine. I'm just saying applicants will mostly know how to convince their friends to blow off class to go to the pub and bitch about Tara's contribution to the group assignment. God, Tara, no, you can't just write the introduction because your cat's dead, okay? No one cares about mittens. Anyway, I've got some specific concerns about the content of the proposed test. Take this reading comprehension exercise in which applicants are told that mining has 2 important factors in its favour, one of which is that it produces no toxic chemical wastes. Yeah, of course there are no toxic chemical wastes. That's why famously coal miners carried canaries with them into coal mines for no other reason than the companionship that canaries famously provide. But why is all this happening now anyway? Well, one argument for the tougher test is national security, with Peter Dutton saying the changes would stop people becoming citizens, fighting overseas, and then sneaking back into the country. Because, you know, when people come back from Syria, the first thing ASIO does is wave through anyone with an Australian citizenship or a Bintang singlet. But more fundamentally, why would a tougher citizenship test prevent domestic terrorist attacks? If they're domestic, by definition, they're already in the country. How does he think terrorists think? Well, I mean, I suppose I could attack now, but I mean, I'm still technically a citizen in this country, so I'm a guest. I'd feel bad about it. You know, if there's one thing my parents taught me, it was death to the West. But if there was another thing they taught me, it was respect for your hosts. You show up on time, you bring a dessert, and you say nice things about the mushroom ragu. But can I ask, though, when did the job of Immigration Minister change from being a job about creating a successful multicultural integrated society and into a job where you convince Australians to fear foreign invasion, to believe that immigrants will steal our jobs or that refugees threaten our way of life? Because in that context, it's hard to believe this proposal is truly designed to help. Because if you wanted to help migrants who are getting a hard time for not speaking English well enough, the solution is not get them to speak English too well. Because I don't know about you, but I don't think eloquence is really the accepted Australian way.
Insufficiently defined and overly broad discretionary powers. Inappropriately reverses the onus of proof in certain circumstances.
Well, what you're viewing on the internet is not what we're interested in.
No one, however smart, however well educated, however experienced, is the suppository of all wisdom.
Well, I mean, they might not pass the speaking component of the test with flying colours, but plenty of them would nail the mining propaganda part of the test.
Welcome back to The League. This week was almost the end of free-to-air Australian community television. You're about to see how close we came, because in this next segment, I mourn its loss with an old friend from the show. Like Dave Thornton, Tommy Little, RMITV hosts who graduate to places like Channel 10. One of the last people to make the leap is The Leak's own Michael Schaefer. I caught up with him recently, and it was as though no time had passed at all.
I'm glad that they're now closing the doors behind me, because I was worried about all these other people coming up and then taking my job. Yeah. So I'm actually quite thrilled. But whoever is responsible for closing down this network, thank you so much.
Was that the correct answer?
Sure, yeah.
Just so you know, this road can be a little dangerous at night. Just so you know. I'm going to speak to the other robbers and I'll tell them about you. So don't worry, in the future, only I will rob you.
Did you start doing the comedy or making the comedy? How did you get started?
Writing stuff on a Facebook page called Round Squares.
Did it feel like a huge leap going from a Facebook page to, you know, doing these shows?
Hugely.
For Michael, this is work experience. And it's work experience fewer and fewer people will get access to.
Most of our audience were old people who accidentally came across the show, or young people who came across it while they were clicking down to like cartoons and stuff.
Yeah.
So we tried to tailor the show to both of those demographics, obviously.
Split the difference. Depending on who you read, Channel 10 is either in financial trouble or being used as a poker chip in our country's media law reform. When I suggested to Michael any station he worked for was doomed to fail, he cordially agreed. Now you're at Channel 10. You're writing on the project. What is that experience like?
Best part is we get a lot of hate mail in.
Are you getting hate mail specifically you? Or?
We did an interview with Margaret Court. She, was against same-sex marriage. We had someone write in the next day say, my son is gay and I used to support same-sex marriage until now.
That's a hell of an interview.
I always was upset about the leak, is that we didn't get enough hate mail. We had a few people on Facebook be like, this is left-wing dribble, and he was right. But
ecstasy contains tar. No, we're fine with that. Ecstasy contains toilet cleaner. No, we're still fine with that. Ecstasy contains gluten. My body is a temple, thank you very much. I will not put that in my body, no.
Could you imagine the next generation of up-and-comings going straight from that Facebook experience that you had all the way into the project experience and skipping all that in between that you had?
Doing the leak and that stuff was very, very helpful, kind of getting a foot in the door on Channel 10. Yeah, it's definitely going to be, really hard for people now without the show trying to get into TV programs. But like I said, that's fantastic, and I really feel a lot more secure in my job. Thank you. Again, I feel like that was the tone of the interview that you wanted. Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. So if you're interested in getting involved in community TV, may I calmly suggest now's the time to jump in, because at the start of this week, this was a segment about the last RMI TV host in history to transition out of Australian community TV. Right now, we'd like to talk about native title. Unfortunately, there are no Indigenous Australians on the panel tonight, and they are the voices that matter on this issue. But we are going to talk about it with as much respect as we can.
Last week, the Senate passed a bill amending the Native Title Act, which changes the approval requirements for Indigenous land use agreements. Previously, if a company wanted to use native title land for a project, they needed unanimous approval from all the Indigenous people in that area who had claimed title. This, believe it or not, was making it tricky for some enormous mining magnates to get approval for their controversial projects.
In totally unrelated news, Mr. Adani of economic and environmental disaster Adani coal mine fame paid Malcolm Turnbull an informal visit. Nothing serious, just some mani-pedis. Hey guys, is it still a pedicure if you have cloven hooves?
And coincidentally, after this meeting, Malcolm rushed through these amendments, and land use agreements now just need approval by a simple majority. That's 50% plus one of the claimants.
Coalition Senator Ian MacDonald was running around calling the amendments the Adani Bill, which blatantly suggests that they don't care about land rights. Indigenous communities know more than anyone that mining interests have a shocking history of polluting native title land. Like, for example, the Ranger uranium mine, which released millions of liters of radioactive water into heritage-listed Kakadu National Park.
So in Australian parlance, you don't think this is bonza?
These laws are designed to make it easier for these destructive companies to set up shop in sacred lands with really important cultural significance for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So, Anthony, no, this is totally unbonza.
And Pam, I'm sceptical about these companies too, but there's another angle to consider, in that some Indigenous leaders have supported these changes because it finally gives their communities democratic control over their native title land. Communities can then negotiate with these companies that will provide jobs for the local community.
Well, that sounds bonza.
Yeah, okay, that's bonza in theory, but heaps of these programs haven't delivered on their promises, which is a form of exploitation. These projects do not deliver long-term employment.
And that's correct, but there is a really delicate balancing process when making informed, independent decisions on land use agreements. The environmental impacts need to be balanced against economic interests, against any number of personal issues we can't even imagine. It's a tough decision, but it's their decision, not ours.
Did it occur to either of you guys this doesn't have to be an either-or option? I
guess.
Yeah, and we can come together on this. You want to protect Indigenous sovereignty. Yeah. And now, Dr. Pam, you want to, how would you sum up what you want to do?
Protect the environment.
Protect the environment.
Yeah, I do. I do want to protect the environment.
How about we do both?
Okay.
Bonza? Bonza?
Bonza. Bonza all around.
All right. Well, there we go. We just solved everything. That was our show for tonight. Now, if Channel 31 were to end tonight, that would have been it. So whatever comes up next, enjoy the hell out of it. Special thanks to all of our contributors on the show, Miss Annie Cal Wonke and her manager, Vidya Rajan, to Michael Schaefer, to the incredible people behind the scenes, as well as our hosts, Dr. Pam Reiner and Pat McCaffrey. Stay tuned now on Facebook for our post-show. Until next week, I'm Anthony McCormack. Good night.